Hi everyone, today we're gonna see how we can integrate TypeScript within KnexJS in our Node.js project. So let's start by opening our terminal within our project. And we're going to install some packages. We're gonna use Knex, which is the database user, and SQLite 3, because we're gonna use a simple file for our database. Now the next step to do is to init the Knex file with TypeScript, and this is done with the option -xts. And as you can see, we have a new file called knexfile.ts. This file, it contains all the details about our development environment, our staging and our production environment. Later down the course, we're gonna see how to add another one for the test environment. As you can see, each one of them can be set for a different type of database, such as SQLite, which is gonna be our case, but also Postgres, MySQL, or even the Microsoft database. Now, because we want to have everything inside our source directory, we're gonna move this file into the source directory inside the database folder. So I'm going to create a new folder now, database, and I'm gonna move it inside it. The next thing I wanna do is, since we are using TypeScript, I want to remove and add a little bit of typings in this file. So we're going to import Knex from the Knex package. And this import actually has changed in the last version of Knex. And now we're going to define the interface of our file. It's gonna be of a dictionary type. So I call the interface iknexconfig. As I said, it's a dictionary type, so we have a key of type string, which is gonna be, for example, development, staging, testing, etc. Each one of those is gonna be of type knexconfig. We're gonna assign this object to a variable, actually to a constant more correctly, named configs of type iknexconfig, and then we're going to export as a default this configs variable. Now, as you can see, the file name in here, it's located under .dev.sqlite3. Now, the problem with this location is that when you run the database through the command line, or when you run the Node.js application itself, this file name is gonna change. So, for easiness, it's best to put just the full path, including your user space and everything. This way it's gonna be sure that the location of the file is always correct and you won't have any problems when using it. Neither with Node.js, neither with the command line tool that Knex provides. So I'm going to just copy the path of this database folder, and I'm going to substitute this path to what I have now inside my file name. Of course, if you choose to use some other database technologies such as MySQL, Postgres, etc., you won't have this problem because the database, it is not going to be used with as a file, but just as a connection. So I'm gonna set another couple of options, such as debug set to true, and then the second option we need to set is use null as a default. Use null as a default is a variable that is going to make sure that our SQLite is always going to set the value null rather than an empty value in our column. Now the next thing what we have to do, we want to define a Knex with all the variables that we can use. Since we moved the Knex file, we want to avoid to specify every time the location of such file. So doing it through Node.js is going to allow us to call npm run next everywhere. So Knex is located under the Node modules folder, bin, and then Knex. And then we're going to specify the Knex file flag, which is located under source database knexfile.ts. And now every time we're going to run npm run Knex, it's actually a shortcut for this. So let's open the terminal and test out if it works. So npm run Knex. And we can create our first migration. So we're going to create a table for our authors. As you can see, in the source directory database, there is a migrations folder. I'm going to create a second migration for the books table. So if we go inside the database migration folder, we can see a file called create author and create books. Now, what we need to do, we need to insert the data that we need for these tables to be created correctly. So we're going to define the table and parameters such as table name, table properties such as the ID of the table, which we're going to use UUID. So we're going to return a knex.schema.create table. And the first parameter we need to specify is the name of the table we want to create, in this case authors. And then the second function is a function that is passed through a parameter named table of type knex.tablebuilder. And this is what is going to return. Well, actually, we don't need to do a return. That's a mistake I made while registering this video. Yeah, okay, deleted it. Table.uuid named ID, and this is going to be our primary key. And this is going to be not null, not nullable. And also has to be unique. When we generate the UUID, of course, should be little chance that this is going to fail because it's not unique. Then we want the string name, which is a nullable parameter. Maybe we can have a book without a nota. Or a unknown OTA, I'm not sure. Then we're going to have a couple of integers with age and rating. And not specifying anything else after it, because it can actually be that the value is a null value. Maybe we don't know the author age, or the author doesn't have any ratings. Last, we're going to need to put a parameter called timestamps. The timestamps variable takes two parameters, true and true, which means we're going to add a created at and updated at variable, which is going to be generated for us by and managed for us directly by Knex without us having to do anything else. Now, because I'm a little bit lazy, for the books table, I'm gonna just copy paste what I already done. Things are gonna be very simple and similar. The table name, of course, is gonna be books. We don't have a name, but we have a title. We're gonna have a genre, which is gonna be a string, still a rating for the books, and still a time stamps object for our table. We also need a parameter for author ID, which is what we're gonna use to link back to the authors table. So the author table references the ID on the table authors, and the syntax is using this inTable method. Now, initially when I registered this video, I made a mistake and I called the table authors twice, causing the problem that you're seeing in the terminal right now. Essentially, I couldn't do the migration correctly. So I changed the table name to books rather than authors in the second migration, and ran the migration through npm run knex migrations latest, as you saw in the video. And this allowed me to create all the tables correctly in SQLite. So as you can see in SQLite Explorer, I can see all the tables named correctly. The next bit to do is to do a little bit of seeding of those tables. So I'm going to get rid of these constants from my schema, and I'm going to move them into a seed. To do a seed, I need to install a new package, UUID, which I'm going to use to generate the UUIDs that I need for my seed data. And then I'm going to do npm run knex seed make, initially just the name of the seed that I want to create. And this is going to create a new seeds folder with a file named initial under my database. And in here, I have an example about what a seed might look like. So the table name, of course, is going to be substituted with the values that I want to have inside my database. And in this case, I'm going to put the authors and books values inside, the ones that I have in that JSON format. I'm going to be in here using the generated UUID. So I'm going to delete all of this, and I'm going to put the data of the authors that I had before. I just generated an ID with the UUID package and copy-pasted it here for simplicity rather than doing a map of the object. Now the delete method ensures that the tables are going to be emptied before doing the seeding, so that if we run a migration, for example, every time before we run the tests in our project, which is what we're gonna do in the future, the system won't complain saying that there is a duplicate key, for example, or maybe we're gonna see the same author multiple times. We ensure that the database is gonna be deleted every time, the table is going to be deleted every time we do the seeding. Before the seed, table empty, and it's good to go. Everything looks fine. So we can go into the terminal and run our migration. So the migration is npm run knex seed, and it's informing us that the seed file has been run successfully. So if we open again with SQLite Explorer the authors table, we can see all the data is there, plus the created at and updated at values with the current date and time in UTC, of course. Books, same, we have the books in there with the author ID, created at and updated at values. And this puts us ready for keep working with our database. So we can move our schema to use Knex directly to retrieve data. Since we made all those changes, I want to make sure that those changes are going to be saved into my Git repository that you can find on GitHub and link on the description below. So let's get rid of these books and authors JSON objects, and I'm gonna add a db.ts file. The job of this db.ts file is to give us back a Knex object, which is the representation of the database, and this representation of the database is depending on the environment in which we are in. So what we want to do in here, we take all the configs from the Knex file, then we check which Node.js process, which environment in the Node.js project is being run, and we return the correct config for such environment. So we take configs and then we select it based on process.m.node.env. If such variable is undefined, we default it to development variable, to the development config. However, in a future lesson, we are going to see how to use environment files to define such variable. I remind you that all the lessons can be looked through the playlist associated with this lesson and the others. So we are going to export this Knex from the config file, and now this database can actually be used in other parts of our application. So just a reminder, the development is coming from here with all the variables, and we can use any kind of database development, and Knex is going to take care of the connection and the pooling for us. Let's go back to our schema and let's get rid of these two objects. Now, where VS Code is telling us that there is a mistake, it's where we need to use our database object. So we're gonna change all of this to use the database, DB, and the automatic import is taking it. We can specify the table name, but we can also skip it. We can select everything, which is equivalent to saying select star. Then you can specify from which table we want to use, in this case books, and then where author ID is equal to parent.author ID function. Also, we want to just return one record, otherwise it will be returning an array of records, which is not what GraphQL is expecting from us. Let's move on the next query, and this one is about books. So here we have to essentially do the same thing. We need to return DB from the books table, where the ID is equal the books.id in the table. The ID column is equal to the ID that is coming from our argument object. So where ID equal to ID. And then we're just going to return the first object, because again, it's not an array of results that GraphQL is expecting, but it's simply one record, one book for one ID, which also makes perfect sense, of course. And now we're left with the authors object. We need to take all the authors and return, do essentially the exact same thing we did for books, but for the authors table. I remind that you can also select DB and then specify the authors, books, or anyway the table name inside the DB object, and then select only the columns that you're interested, if any. You can also remove the from statement, and then do just a where. Now, with the latest version of Knex, if you do this operation like I'm displaying it right now, you're going to see a warning message saying that calling database or the next object without a table name is actually going to be deprecated. Now, let's run our server and let's have a look if our GraphQL is working correctly. Okay, we opened our GraphQL instance. We can see that there are no errors happening. We can still see the query types. So let's do our first query to retrieve a book with a certain ID. Let's grab an ID from the database that maybe we're gonna need to make a new method to retrieve all the books or all the authors so that we don't have to do this operation. However, for now, I'm just going to copy the ID of the book from here, pass it to my query, and then I'm going to request the title, making sure that I remove any extra spaces from the ID because it would actually be incorrect when it comes back. So from the author, we can also get the name, the rating, and the ID of the author, which is going to be from the merged table. And there you are. All the values are coming back correctly. We can also do a test trying to retrieve the author query directly. Let's query a different author, then I should have requested a different author, but I'm not doing it, so fine. So we retrieve the ID, the name, age, and rating. since we haven't exported or defined the age in GraphQL, we need to go back to our editor to fix it, which I did. So for today's lesson, this is everything. I hope you guys enjoyed. See you at the next lesson. And if you're new on this channel, please like and subscribe to this channel if you found it useful. Thank you very much and see you next time. Bye bye.